General Hospital spoilers for Monday, May 12 tease that Joe's true identity is becoming an inescapable obsession, not just for Lulu, but for everyone connected to him, family, friends. Even those who once thought his presence was just another footnote in the complicated tapestry of life in Port Charles. But as layers of the past begin to peel away and seemingly meaningless details start revealing strange connections, everyone is forced to face a horrifying truth. Gio is not just an ordinary teenager. He is a switched piece in a twisted tale of manipulation, sacrifice, and betrayal. And that truth, once it begins to surface, is dragging the entire town into an uncontrollable whirlwind. Lulu, the first to suspect, initially only felt that something was off. A familiar look in Joe's eyes. An instinctive reaction no one could explain, a hazy memory during her coma that carried a deep sense of loss. She once believed she was imagining it all, thinking it was a side effect of her prolonged unconsciousness. But a mother's intuition is never wrong. Step by step, the pieces started coming together, from tampered documents and a birth certificate missing the mother's name to an old photograph hidden in Brooke Lynn's drawer, showing a newborn with Joe's eyes cradled by a tense, uncertain young woman. The question of Joe's identity is no longer a whispered rumor in hospital corridors or over dinner. It has become a storm that threatens to destroy everything. Lulu is no longer just a strong woman seeking her child in a fog of memory. She has become a fiercer, more volatile version of herself, relentless and uncompromising. She begins showing up unannounced at old acquaintances' workplaces, interrogating nurses, doctors, and administrative staff, anyone who might have been at the hospital during that fateful time. Her eyes burn with a mix of desperation and determination, and each time she meets silence or refusal, her obsession deepens. For Lulu, the truth is no longer a choice, it's a command. While Lulu spirals into a frenzied hunt for answers, Gio begins to question himself. He senses the change in how people look at him, hears the whispers that die out as he enters the room. But worse than all that is the disorienting sense of not knowing what's real anymore. Everything he once trusted, Lois, Brooke Lynn, Dante, has become blurred. He feels like a puppet placed on the wrong stage, a truth swapped out to serve a purpose he doesn't understand. And the deepest pain doesn't come from the answers, but from the silence that surrounds them. Panic spreads within the family. Dante finds himself torn between denial and panic, unsure whether to feel joy or sorrow at the possibility that Gio might be his and Lulu's biological son. Brooke Lynn, usually sharp and composed, is on the verge of collapse, trapped between keeping the secret and confessing. Lois, the one who holds much of the secret, grows terrifyingly cold, as if she's been preparing for this moment all along. It's as if they're all being pulled into a pit of their own making, where every word and every action could be the final drop that overflows the cup. Port Charles is no longer a place where the truth can hide. Lulu's discoveries begin to leak. Local media picks up the story. Relationships, reputations, and public trust are all put to the test. Gio becomes the epicenter of a story no one wants to tell, but everyone must hear. He's no longer just the boy with a vague adoption story. He's now a symbol of the collapse of the masks the family has worn for over a decade. And the most haunting question echoes in everyone's mind. If Gio truly is Lulu's son, who ordered the switch? Why? And why is the truth only coming to light now? Gio lives in agonizing isolation. He looks into the mirror and no longer recognizes himself. He can't speak to Dante without feeling estranged. He can't look at Lois without feeling betrayed. He can't be near Lulu without feeling wounded. Identity, something that should be the most basic foundation of a person, has become a sharp blade that cuts into him day by day, hour by hour. He wants to run, disappear, go back, but it's too late. The story has spiraled out of control. And Lulu, in her panic as the truth closes in, doesn't realize that the path she's forging is pushing Gio further from her. In the end, Joe's identity is no longer just a mystery to solve, it's become the epicenter of a crisis. An emotional, moral, familial, and societal storm. And the scariest part isn't who Joe's real parents are, but how many lives will be destroyed by the truth. The new twists and chaos Lulu continues to stir in her search for answers have sparked an emotional disaster no one can stop. Once everything hidden is brought to light, no one, not even Gio, will ever be the same again. Lois stands at the eye of a storm she quietly nurtured for years. As Joe's true identity edges closer to the surface, Lois can no longer hide what she tried so hard to keep in the dark. The lies she once believed necessary to protect the people she loved are now ticking time bombs threatening to destroy everything she fought to preserve. The story is no longer just about an adopted child, it's a power struggle between maternal instinct, personal honor, and exploding political interests. Especially now that Brooke Lynn has inadvertently become the focal point of a war she doesn't fully understand. Driven by her fierce maternal instinct, Lois once made an unthinkable decision: to protect Joe's identity at all costs. She believed that staying silent and crafting the perfect adoption narrative for Brooke Lynn would shield the child from turmoil and judgment. But now, as fragments of truth begin to leak, the very lies she once thought compassionate are coming back to haunt her. Every cover-up, from erasing medical records to threatening conversations with those who knew the truth, is being exposed, piece by piece, forcing Lois to face judgment not only from others but from herself. Brooke Lynn, originally just a part of Lois's protection plan, has now become another ticking bomb. Her legal rights, family bonds, and career are all at risk as Joe's identity comes under the microscope. If it's proven that Gio is not her biological child, but rather Lulu and Dante's, not only will the family dynamic collapse, but inheritance rights, public image, and legal standing could spiral into chaos. Brooke Lynn may lose the child she raised as her own, and possibly her place in the Quartermaine family if things worsen. Meanwhile, Lois scrambles in desperation. Her latest calculations aren't about hiding the truth, but damage control. She starts consulting lawyers, reaching out to old allies, and even considers media strategies to shape public perception if the story breaks. She knows time is running out. Lulu is closing in on the core truth, and once she gets irrefutable evidence, it will all fall apart. But what Lois fears most isn't disgrace or accusations, it's the look in Joe's eyes if he ever finds out that his entire childhood was a carefully scripted lie. With her as the lead director, each day, her inconsistencies become more apparent. Answers that once came easily now seem vague and hesitant. Her efforts to shield Gio now make her behavior increasingly erratic, exposing the cracks in her narrative. She feels herself losing control, not just of the truth, but of who she is. And as her loved ones begin to ask questions, from Dante to Sunny, Olivia, even Brooke Lynn, Lois realizes that the madness she tried to contain is now out of her hands. Port Charles, once a haven of connection and warmth, now feels like the loneliest place for her. Every suspicious glance, every broken conversation, every averted gaze from the people she loves feels like a dagger. And she knows that the longer she clings to this secret, the worse it gets. But giving it up would mean losing everything: the grandson she treated like her own, her daughter's trust, and the fragile peace she sacrificed so much for. In the end, Lois realizes she is no longer the one controlling the story. New forces and shifting truths are reshaping Joe's entire life, and she is just one of many paying the price. The lies that once saved a moment in the past are now ticking bombs in the present. And when the final explosion hits, no one will know what remains after the ashes of a story that never should have been written. Emma was being pulled into a dark spiral so deep that even she could no longer pinpoint its beginning. As her connection with Dalton turned into a dangerous obsession, one capable of reshaping her entire life. In the early days with Dalton, everything felt like an unusual but captivating dream, a mysterious world where Emma, someone who had always lived righteously, in control, and guided by a rational heart, suddenly let herself go. Dalton was unlike anyone she had ever met. He carried a chilling calmness, a sharp intellect, and a persuasive charm that made every warning sound absurd. But it was precisely these seemingly alluring traits that began to give rise to a new obsession, seeping into Emma's mind and causing her to lose her bearings between reality and the illusions Dalton crafted. Each passing day, Emma felt her emotions being reset in invisible, control cycles orchestrated by Dalton. Some days, he made her feel loved, understood, and cherished like the center of the universe. Then, with just a glance or a sentence, he would push her into feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, guilt, and self-doubt. This emotional fluctuation suffocated Emma's reasoning, turning her into a distorted version of herself, someone willing to deny friends and family, erase cherished memories, all to cling to the false sense of security Dalton offered. Emma knew it was wrong. She knew she was being manipulated. But her torment and confusion were overshadowed by a deeper fear, that without Dalton, she would have nothing left, not even herself. And while Emma sank further into her addiction to this emotional roller coaster, Jocelyn, her closest friend, who had grown up with her and shared every joy and sorrow, began to sense one of the most dangerous transformations was taking place. Jocelyn didn't just feel that Emma was drifting away, she could see clearly that Emma was being manipulated, drawn into a darkness from which she couldn't escape alone. The change in Emma's eyes, voice, habits, and even her rushed decisions made it evident. At first, Jocelyn tried to reach out gently, with listening and advice, but Emma became increasingly defensive, even suspecting that Jocelyn was trying to break her and Dalton apart. That was when Jocelyn realized she had to do more than talk, she had to act. No longer trusting Dalton's sweet words, she began her own investigation. She reached out to people who had worked with him, women who had vague pasts with him and then disappeared from the social scene. What she discovered chilled her to the core. Dalton wasn't just emotionally dangerous, he was a man who had repeatedly used fake identities and psychological manipulation to exploit and control emotionally vulnerable women. He left no clear trail, but everyone who had crossed paths with him bore a deep emotional scar. And the most terrifying part was this. Emma, who had always yearned for love and recognition, was the perfect victim for his terrifying manipulation pattern. While Jocelyn prepared her plan to expose Dalton, Emma remained lost in what she believed was love. She ignored Jocelyn's calls, dismissed her warning messages, and began severing ties with the people who had once been her emotional anchors. She moved closer to Dalton, stopped appearing in familiar places, no longer posted online, and withdrew from all community activities. To Emma, this was how she protected love from those who wanted to destroy it. But in truth, she was being drained of energy, trapped in a psychological loop she couldn't break free from. And though there were moments when Emma woke up in the middle of the night gripped by fear, or when silent tears fell as she looked at old photos with Jocelyn, every time Dalton returned, those feelings vanished with a single touch, a familiar word of comfort. Jocelyn, no longer patient enough to wait for Emma to awaken from within, prepared her counterstrike. She gathered evidence, planned to expose Dalton at a public event where Emma couldn't look away. But Jocelyn also knew this wouldn't just be about saving Emma, it might be the most brutal psychological battle she had ever fought. Dalton was a master manipulator, able to read people, exploit weaknesses, and strike back with refined emotional control. But Jocelyn was ready to risk it all. Because Emma deserved to return to her true self. She deserved real love, not imprisonment in a love built on manipulation and fear. And when everything reached a boiling point, Emma's obsession clashing with Jocelyn's fierce determination to save her, an emotional explosion was inevitable. Lies began to crumble. And those once silent started to speak up. Emma, torn between a harsh truth and hollow promises, spiraled into panic. But in that moment, when Jocelyn embraced her without saying a word, just holding her tightly so she could feel real warmth, Emma realized. Love isn't something that makes you doubt yourself or lose everything, it's a place where you are allowed to be fully and freely yourself. And in that fragile moment, one woman escaped obsession. And another one not only for her friend, but for her faith that something good still existed. Sidwell stood before a new threshold, one with no room for hesitation or half-measures. The battle he was about to ignite was not merely a media manipulation or a strategic blow in the arena of public opinion, it was an all-out confrontation. where every alliance and every shift in power could become the spark that ignited an uncontrollable explosion. Sidwell knew this was the most fertile moment to implant influence and reshape a decayed order at the heart of Port Charles. Quietly, he had built a new network, an audacious alliance among three people who seemed incapable of sitting at the same table: Drew, Tracy, and himself. This union was no coincidence. And it held no sentiment. It was forged from a series of silent calculations, driven by a need for control, and, above all, by a deep obsession with power and longevity. In Drew, Sidwell saw a media tool capable of amplifying any message or campaign he needed to bring into public light. In Tracy, he found the patience and expertise of a political mastermind, someone who knew how to maneuver, adjust, and manipulate entire systems. And in himself, he saw the connector, the puppeteer, and the one ready to make profound shifts to turn this machinery into a weapon serving his agenda. However, this game would not run quietly. The underground alliance of the three began to cause disturbing fractures on the surface. Drew's supporters grew uneasy as his speeches became too sharp, too politically charged, lacking the sincerity they once admired. Tracy's followers began to question sudden shifts in financial projects and investments. And Sidwell's sudden return to the media spotlight after years of silence made the public wonder, what exactly was he preparing for? The truth was, Sidwell no longer cared about maintaining a good image. He had been sidelined too many times, used and discarded. This time, he wanted to control the entire board. His changes extended beyond communication strategies. They directly impacted the power structure of the city. From controlling information flows and reshaping the public image of political figures, to influencing investigations, interest groups, and even underground economic activity, Sidwell was redrawing the power map, step by relentless step. But the war he was provoking was anything but simple. Each adjustment he made brought stronger reactions from the opposing camps, especially Sonny and those still loyal to the old values. Tensions spread from boardrooms to the streets, from media headlines to political backrooms. Relationships tore apart, secrets began leaking, and buried scandals surfaced, threatening to destroy everything if not swiftly contained. Sidwell knew, every step toward power was also a step deeper into danger. But he wouldn't retreat, not now. The biggest shift wasn't in the system, it was in the people. Drew began to realize he was drifting too far from his original principles but had gone too deep to stop. Tracy started fearing that this alliance might cost her the reputation and legacy she had spent a lifetime building. And Sidwell, though always calm on the outside, couldn't deny the cracks forming within himself. He was obsessed with victory, an obsession that both sharpened and eroded him. It made him more alert than ever, but also lonelier than ever. And as everything edged closer to a breaking point, from media to politics to personal ties, Sidwell remained the only one who saw the full picture. But that also meant if everything collapsed, he'd be the first to fall. One of the adjustments forming now wasn't just a local shift, it was a full transformation for all of Port Charles. And as the pawns moved and games were laid bare day by day, one thing was certain. Sidwell would not stop, not now that he held the key to the entire system operating behind the illusion of a solid political and media front. The story behind the calculated and deep-rooted reasons why Portia and Nina secretly drugged Drew is now exploding like an emotional bomb, spreading across Port Charles and shaking the town not just because of the concealed truth, but also due to the psychological consequences that follow. When the incident first leaked, public opinion hesitated, uncertain between rumors and reality. But now, as more details emerge, retrieved messages, indirect witnesses coming forward, Port Charles finds itself amid a crisis of morality and trust, with two women at the center who were once regarded as respectable and reputable, Portia and Nina. They didn't just secretly manipulate Drew, they orchestrated an extremely sophisticated plan to neutralize his influence by exploiting the trust of those closest to him, poisoning his public image, and pushing him into isolation, both within the community and the healthcare system. It all started with a series of seemingly harmless interactions, friendly meetings between Nina, Portia, and Drew. But behind those moments lay a complex chain of calculated moves designed to lead Drew into a state of mental and reputational breakdown. The drug he was given not only caused temporary disorientation but also left subtle traces that tampered with lab results, leading to misdiagnoses that could jeopardize his leadership credibility and long-term medical records. What Nina didn't anticipate was that the truth would begin to crack from the place she was most vulnerable, her own daughter, Willow. After a long period of silence, Willow began to notice inconsistencies in her mother's words and behavior. When Drew approached her, not with bitterness, but with eyes full of pain and lost trust, Willow started to question everything. She recalled times when Nina subtly nudged her to distrust Drew, whispering implications that he was emotionally manipulative or power-hungry, and she realized something was seriously wrong. As someone who had once forgiven her mother, Willow now stood at a painful crossroads, to maintain their relationship in silence, or to face the truth, no matter how devastating. Sensing the shift in Willow's tone and gaze, Nina began adjusting her tactics. Instead of avoiding confrontation, she initiated seemingly casual conversations designed to reshape Willow's perspective. She spoke of what had to be done to protect the family, and of those secretly pulling strings from within, vague statements meant to plant seeds of doubt in a daughter still searching for a reason to preserve their bond. However, it was this repeated vagueness, and Nina's clear avoidance of specific answers, that only pushed Willow further toward finding clarity, not to accuse, but to understand whether her mother had indeed done something unforgivable. One day, while sorting through hospital archives, Willow accidentally came across an old diagnostic report for Drew, hidden in storage. The medical data didn't match the symptoms Drew had described during the same time frame. Later, she found an internal report bearing Portia's name, signed but never officially logged into the hospital system. At that moment, Willow knew, this was no longer speculation. It was real. Her own mother, along with Portia, the department head with the authority to alter records without suspicion, had silently orchestrated this anomaly. Willow was shattered. It felt as if every moral foundation she had been raised on was now crumbling. But this emotional explosion didn't stop at a personal level. As Willow began to share her suspicions with Michael, and Carly noticed Portia's unusual behavior at the hospital, the situation rapidly escalated into a media and ethical crisis. Nina became increasingly cornered as former allies withdrew, wanting no part in a scandal capable of shaking the healthcare system, the media landscape, and even the Corinthos family. Portia, under immense pressure from hospital leadership and the community, began showing signs of psychological breakdown. Meanwhile, Drew, the victim, displayed remarkable resilience. He didn't seek revenge, but quietly gathered evidence to restore the truth and reclaim his dignity. Nina, once viewed as a woman who had emerged from darkness, now found herself once again at its very center. But this time, there was no one left to blame, no one to pull her out. She had to face her own choices, and the cost of believing that the end justified the means. And in that moment, as she looked into Willow's eyes, no longer filled with anger, but with deep, soul-crushing disappointment, Nina understood that she had lost the one thing that truly mattered. The truth had come to light. But the true cost wasn't legal consequences, it was the shattering of a mother-daughter relationship she had once believed was mended. And as the storm continues to sweep across Port Charles, not everyone will have a place left to stand when the dust finally settles.